Welcome to Breaking the Lines pod. I'm Arlen.
I'm Akeem, and this is the Premier League podcast.
All right, let's just jump right into it, I guess. We'll start with match week one, eventful match week, I'd say. Thank God the Premier League is back. It was a boring, very boring summer. The first game of the match week started with the reigning champions Liverpool versus Bournemouth. Liverpool was home. A lot of new signings for Liverpool. Ended up 4-2. What did you think? What did you make of the game, Akeem?
First off, just before we start, I would have to say, not so boring for us Chelsea fans out here in America this summer, of course. So we're also happy that the Prem is back for sure. But yeah, eventful week from Brentford and Liverpool. Was it Brentford, Liverpool, you said?
Bournemouth,
Bournemouth,
Liverpool.
Liverpool. Eventful week from that. I didn't get to see the full game itself, but I know from what I pretty much caught from that game that it was a tight game. Liverpool got the winning and the breakaway fourth goal, I believe, towards the end of that game. So yeah, eventful week. Liverpool is looking, it's the season just started. I know they're just coming off a preseason, so not that crazy. You got to give them some more time, but they're still looking a little bit shaky. But I mean, returning champs, starting with a victory, you can't ask for anything else.
I completely agree. I guess we'll kind of move through the results. We have 3 match weeks to get through a lot, and then I guess we can kind of go over where we think each team is. Going into this fourth match week and what we anticipate to happen, and then kind of do a little review afterwards. Moving on from the Liverpool game, the first match week had Villa Newcastle at 0-0. In Fulham at 1-1, Sunderland, West Ham 3-0 victory for Sunderland. That was a shocking one. What did you make of those 3 games? I know kind of looking at that myself, I feel like Sunderland is a standout. I mean, I don't think anyone expected them to, beat West Ham 3-0 on the opening day, coming from promotion and all that. Anything you wanted to touch base on those games?
Yeah, man. We all kind of had an eye out for Sunderland this season, especially with the signings that they've made. But I think to start 3 to West Ham, not to say that West Ham was amazing last year, but 3-0 away to a steady Premier League side that we would say I think is a good result for them. Was a shocker for sure, but very happy and a good game to watch. I think Sunderland would be okay this year because they've made some decent signing like Granite Xhaka and stuff like that. Those are Premier League proven players, so it's not as if it's so far off. But we will see. The Premier League is unpredictable. Also, the other games, the Brighton game, Brighton looks okay to start their season. I like Brighton's manager. I'm a big fan, a young guy, so obviously want to support him as much as he can. And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's his name? Fabian Hertzler.
Yeah, Fabian. I know it's Fabian. I don't know how to pronounce the last name. I don't want to get caught up, so until I learn, I won't say it.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I like Brian's team. I think Brian has been one of those teams the last few years where they're kind of bouncing around, right? They're like that mid-table, kind of upper mid-table, and they'll have some good results and then they'll go and have some bad results. So, it's definitely a process for them. But I think they definitely have the right manager for what they're looking to do and what they're capable
Mm-hmm.
of. But yeah, I think that's a great point. The rest of the games for the match week, Spurs, Burnley 3-0 victory for Spurs to the newly promoted Burnley for I don't know how many times in a row, but not really a surprise there, to be honest, from my opinion. I think everyone kind of expected Spurs to beat Burnley at home. The last game of that Saturday in the first match week was City at Wolves and a 4-0 victory to City. And I think, and I guess we'll touch base on this a little bit later too, but 4-0 victory at Wolves, I think everyone was, signing off for the end of the day on Saturday thinking that City's back. What did you make of it?
Yeah, that 4-0, I think everyone thought City was back for sure. And with the signings that they've made this summer, Turkey coming in, Reinders coming in midfield, they didn't really touch the defense. I'm a Chelsea fan, so obviously goalkeeping is not something I can really speak about, but I'm still a bit iffy about Donnarumma coming in, with the way that City wants to play. So I think there's some question mark, but after that 4-0 win, I think everybody thought that, yeah, they're going to be right back to the top of the table. But then we saw what happened in the second game week. So I think City is something that we watch for this year. For me, the one big takeaway from that weekend, I know we expected it, but I think Tottenham looks good, man. You got to give it to them. I think finally they have a manager that plays in terms of a more flexible, tactical way. I saw them against PSG. I watched that game all the way up until it was 2-0 at 83 minutes. But they play smart. They're playing, not that they play smart, but they're playing in a way of where they're trying to get the result and understanding what to do. So, I mean, yes, newly promoted, but you got to remember this is a team that lost, I believe, expression will tell you 21 or 22 games last season. So 3-0 start, and the way they've started this season was also a good result for Spurs. They look good under Thomas Frank.
Yeah, I think we spoke about this actually when he got appointed, but I think we both like him as a manager, and we both think that, he definitely has the quality to do well at Spurs. There is one thing that I really like about him, and I think it's his ability to adapt. And I know that we've discussed this in the past. I think that that's one criticism that Spurs fans would have had of Ange is just so stuck in his ways that he's not going to adapt depending on who his opponent is. And I think that Spurs this year under Thomas Frank will look a little bit different in the bigger games. And I'm actually excited to see one of those games where you know you kind of see the mentality and the shift and well, I guess we'll get into it in the second match week because they ended up playing City in the second match week and we can discuss that. But I think that's going to be a really good pickup. I think that's honestly a better pickup than any player Spurs could have picked up is the fact that Thomas Frank is their manager going into the season. City too. I honestly do not know what to make of City. I know that we're going through the first match week results, but overall, I mean, some of the signings that have come in are just to me just don't seem like Pep-like signings. Like and Donnarumma is a great point. I don't see why Pep would have wanted him. As a goalkeeper, I think he has great abilities, shot saving, but the distribution is just something that I do not think that he is up to par with a manager like Pep and his philosophies. But I guess, we'll find out as the season goes on what's going on with that. I guess moving forward, the first game on that Sunday was your beloved Chelsea at home to Crystal Palace, and that infamous as a disallowed goal, I think really stole the headlines of that game. Myself, I came into this season really sort of expect and you'll be able to speak to this a lot better than I am just because you watch Chelsea a lot more, but based off of what I saw in the Club World Cup and even towards the end of the last season, for me it really seems like Chelsea have figured out that midfield, and just it just looks so solid, right? And I think we spoke about this the other day, you and I, where I think we're both in agreement that that's probably one of the best midfielders in the league. It definitely can give any midfielder a run for their money, and definitely strengthened in attack as well. I do kind of have some reservations about the defense, but again, that's me not watching Chelsea in and out, like you do. So you'd be able to speak to that a lot more. And the goalkeeper too. I honestly thought that Chelsea would have signed a goalkeeper this summer, just going based off of the last couple years and what they've had in that department. But what do you think? I mean, what do you think based off of that analysis? Do you agree with it? Do you?
No, I think as a fan, we've obviously changed over the past couple of years, especially under Claire Lake. Even before Claire Lake, for me, you know how I followed Chelsea for a very long time, but I think even in that time when you and I met, you know how crazy I was for Hazard. I've been crying out for something like this, just a structure and stuff, of how we do stuff, sporting director, all that stuff. Because above all, like the continual, greatness or whatever the case might be to win, you need structure. So I think, like you said, yeah, we have one of the better midfields, I would say. I'm very proud of saying that after all the stuff that we went through. But I do agree. I don't think that I don't look at Chelsea and say, we are the best team. What I would say is, and I know a lot of people have questioned our defense and goalkeeper, and I was one of those as well last season. Trust me, I was probably one of the first ones. I watched the league a lot, and a lot we're watching the league. I'm not saying that I'm comparing and contrasting or whatever, but for instance, I remember Nottingham Forest last year. They were praised for being, and I know you can talk about this as well. You probably, I don't know how you see it, but they were praised for being one of the most defensive team in the league. not defensive, but they were very strong. You know what I mean? Like they were one of the better teams and they were praised for that. And when you look at the stats, I don't know what the stats is at the end of the season, but I know I checked it probably about 6 games ago. And I think we had conceded and had the same amount of clean sheet or probably less goals. So I'm not saying that our defense is good. I think our defense is like the rest of our team. We have a young team that I think is kind of some players can be they still question marks around them. But the thing is, with the question mark around them, what I would say is after watching the league, I don't know if we can go out there like I was a big advocate of getting Robert Sanchez out of goal. And I remember sending the text to my friends probably about 2 months before the season ends. And I think this is a guy that we can work with because, and I only said that like what we said about Donnarumma, right? Like when I look around, Donnarumma is great shot stopping, he's good, but his feet is not so good, and he's a little bit iffy sometimes coming out to catch crossing. So I think when you look around, I would say for Chelsea, I don't think that they are the best team, but they have a very young team that can grow. I've watched Levi Colwill grown into someone that I've given a lot of critique, but I've always known he was good. But I've given a lot of, I think he's grown into becoming a decent center back. He's young, a lot to learn, but yeah. So like with the midfield, I think we have one of the better midfields, but I think along with the attack and the defense, there's room for improvement. So I'm not gonna say that we're favorites or anything for anything, but we will be a good team challenging, I think, this season. So yeah, I guess I do agree with you above all. But what I don't say is I don't have question mark. I just think that it's not question mark necessarily for me over the defense. It's just they can grow. But I've also seen Levi. I watched Levi all of last season. I think us getting top four and winning the Club World Cup was a lot to do with Levi, someone that was 2 years ago playing left back, but also just, playing very young and a little bit immature with the way that he was playing. So I'm very happy to see the way the team is growing. And as the season goes by, I'm sure we will grow along with our managers. Question marks, wouldn't phase it that way. I would put it more as a young team that's still learning their way. So yeah, they're not favorites.
Yeah, I can see that, and it kind of makes sense, right? And like I said, you watch Chelsea a lot more than I do, right? So I definitely appreciate the insight from somebody who's, watching them and analyzing them in the way that anybody will watch their team and analyze their team. Yeah, let's move on to the next game, I guess. The team that you were just mentioning, Nottingham Forest, 3-1 at home to Brentford. I agree with sort of what you said, even without looking at the statistics and just watching Nottingham Forest last year. I can't tell you the amount of goals I saw them score where they're coming in from their low block and just counterattack and just straight pace and somehow Chris Wood is getting up there, keeping up with the wingers and just, putting the ball in the back of the net. I can't tell you the amount of times I remember watching them last year and seeing that. I did have my reservations about kind of what Forest would be like this year, just because a lot more games this year, right? You have European football this year. I know that they kind of made some signings late in the summer, but it's it's really, to me, they kind of seemed almost like panic signings. It's almost like, we lost a couple of key players and now, we just got to get bodies in the door, right? Just to make up our squad numbers. So I don't really know what to make of them going forward, but I wanna say I don't think that they'll be as successful as they were last year, but I could be proven completely wrong, and for their case, I hope I am. I think that they definitely added a very good sort of entertaining side to the league last year, right? It was kind of like a subplot within all the other plots that played out throughout the year, so I'm hoping that, they have that strength again, give some teams, some good games, but, we'll see.
I still think they will be a threat. I think the team is the only thing changed my opinion a bit is to see how Ange comes in and how he settles in. And like you said earlier, I think there's just is Ange one thing why Spurs fan love or well, Spurs is getting so far from Thomas is the adaptability. So for and I think there's still question mark in how he's gonna play. And like you just explained, Nottingham coming from playing like a low block kind of most of their games to now, Ange is a very front foot manager. So It will be interesting. I think with Nuno, if it was Nuno, I'd be more fearful. But with Ange, it will be interesting. I mean, he could come in and rock it up as well. So it's definitely interesting. I'm not as fearful as I was. I was more fearful than you with when Nuno was there because I think when they sit back in that low block, they're probably one of the best in the league when they do that. Yeah, with Ange, I'll definitely have to see how Ange settle in, but not as fearful as I was with Nuno.
Yeah, yeah. That's that's another thing that I'm kind of, curious to see how that plays out with them because like we've been mentioning, Forest is just an ultimate low block counterattacking transition team, right? And that's where most of their success came from last season. To have somebody come in where they change the position of that line where it's so much further up the field, I don't know. I'm curious to see if Ange changes that philosophy, which I think that there definitely will be some change. But I guess what I'm more curious to see is if he does have any of that adaptability that we've been mentioning. Like,
I
I
don't think so though.
yeah, and that's why I'm very curious because that changes the Forest team completely, right? You're changing the whole philosophy. So as a team, it's like you're flipping it upside down. So you have no idea what to expect from them at that point, right? So I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. I'll be honest with you. I think it's great that Ange is back in the league. It adds a bit of drama to the league itself, right? The two teams basically switched managers, Forest and Spurs. So I think that's going to be an interesting storyline throughout the year. Moving on, my beloved Arsenal beat United at home, or at Old Trafford, I should say, 1-0. I will say, watching that game, it was not really a pleasant watch from an Arsenal fan standpoint, for me at least. I thought it was very sloppy. From our part, we looked sloppy. I thought United was set up very well, and I think part of that also was, I want to say, and this is speculation, but I feel like Arteta didn't necessarily know what to expect from United just because of that whole sort of front line changing. Also, Bruno's position dropping back a little bit, which wasn't the case last year. Amorim really kind of tried to push him in his 2-10 positions that he plays with, and him coming back into the center mid, I think that kind of was like a different piece to the puzzle, and just knowing sort of the amount of tactical concentration that Arteta looks at. I don't know that he would have known exactly what to sort of expect, especially because it's the first game of the season, right? But I think definitely a good result. 1-0 away to United. I don't think that Arsenal have won away to United in a while, so I think that was a very good result. I know that United outshot Arsenal just overall and, shots on target, had more possession in the game, so it really wasn't a good watch from Arsenal standpoint, but 3 points, I guess, is kind of the most important thing, right? Yeah, I really don't know what else to say. I mean, it was just one of those games where, it's over, you get the 3 points, and you kind of just don't want to think about or review or anything of that nature. A goal off of, I think it was a corner kick, if I'm not mistaken, a Calafiori. We're back with the corners again this year. I know the rest of the league really loves that. I see sort of all the, I'd say the kind words that we get in terms of the focus on set pieces. But yeah, I think it's 3 points. That's all that matters. Performance wise, I don't think it was too good overall. And I wouldn't just single out any player. I just think the whole team as a whole just didn't really perform well. I don't know if you got a chance to watch this one or not, but what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I watched it. I watched a full game. From watching it, obviously we had a break in the summer, the Prem is off, and I think everyone was kind of gave Amarin, like you said, that year last year because it wasn't his squad, it wasn't his team. So everyone went with the understanding of, okay, it's Amarin, it's going to take his time to kind of figure these players out, get the deadwoods out and stuff like that. So I think the start of the season, it was, obviously the first game week and it was Arsenal Man U, so it was a big one. So I think that played also into it for Arteta. I don't think it was, I think by far in terms of on the day of who were the better team, I think United was a better team on the day by far. But like you said, I think it's the start of the season. If it was a Chelsea game, I wouldn't be super over the top or obsessed about it or how the way we played and stuff. I know obviously you want to, but I think it was, It was the first time. I don't know. I don't watch United as often, but I watch them enough. But I think it was, if their fan wanna correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was one of the first time in since Emery's been there that they've, imposed themselves on the match the way he wanted them to. So I think for them, yeah, there was obviously positive. If I was in their fan base, game week one, that would be the positive I'm looking for. If they could have gotten a draw, I think a draw would have probably been a more fair result from the way the game went. But yeah, it's week one. I don't think it was anything over the top, anything bad. Arsenal did what they needed to do, and at the end of the day, I mean, each year we can either pick a side, right? You can worry about the performances, or at the end of the year, it's going to be another criticism again if Arsenal doesn't win anything. So I think, yeah, they obviously want to play well, but I didn't see anything overly so bad about it. United, everyone anticipated United being better, and we have all been, they finished 15th. So was it 15th? Yeah.
I think so. I believe so.
So they finished in the bottom half, wherever it was. I don't want to be wrong. So I think it was more of all of that played in. So I don't see it as something so bad. I'm more happy for United to be better this year. I think everybody wants that, but yeah, it was a good game. I think 1-1 would have been a better result. Or if United had nicked it, it wouldn't have been the end of the world either. I mean, it was a good game, a good entertaining 1-0. Honestly, when you're thinking about the top teams going against each other, I think, I don't know, most of the scores that I can remember is like 1-0, 2-1. You know what I mean? It's never a big gap. 1-0, game week one, clean sheet, go back home and it's an away game. I think you take that. Even if it's match week 13, honestly, I think you take that. It's an away game at Old Trafford. We didn't even factor that in. You know what I mean? No matter what, you said, like you mentioned it. Arsenal's only won, I don't know how many times and however many times they've been there the last couple of years. So yeah, it's an away game. First start, 1-0 clean sheet. I think it's happy days.
Absolutely, absolutely, and again, I mean, that's all that really kind of matters. I think from my point of view, going into this season, just sort of, new signings and kind of how the last few years have ended. Um, I was expecting just performance-wise, just a little bit more dominance. But again, I mean, like you said, it's, United, the year that they had last year, add some new signings, more in with the full preseason. I think that, United was always gonna come into this game with some fight in their
Yeah,
belly. They had to, right?
they had to.
That would have been a disaster at Old Trafford, right? I mean, you're just kind of continuing the same sort of like mediocre gameplay and performance that from last year. So I agree with you. I think it's a tale of two sides, but 3 points in the bag. All that matters. The last game of that game week on Monday, Leeds Everton. I think I caught a bit of this game, to be honest. Not too much, bits and pieces here and there. From the parts that I was able to catch, I mostly saw Leeds pushing forward. I know they were home and it's their first game, up from promotion, but I thought to myself, and I kept thinking to myself, I feel like Everton are in trouble. I mean, you're starting a new season, you have a new stadium, a lot of things are kind of looking up, and I don't know that they had enough business in the summer to, or not even enough, but the right business at this point, right? To really say that they're gonna improve and kind of move up the table, you know what I mean? And again, I could be completely wrong. It's just the kind of the feeling I got from watching the parts that I did watch, and then obviously, kind of seeing the result afterwards. It's David Moyes, and we know David Moyes loves Everton, and somehow, he always finds, ways to win at Everton. Even from kind of our viewing of the league in the last few years, it seems like Everton just kind of barely escaped. Going back to, our younger days when we used to watch this league, and Everton used to be a top 8 team. It would be a team that always gave issues to the top teams. I definitely want to see them come back to that point. Do I think that they will this year? I don't think so. I think there's a lot more stronger teams than them, but I don't know. I don't know. I honestly don't know what to expect from them. I'd like to see them get better. Losing to Leeds, I know that they were away, is kind of disappointing in my opinion, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it is a bit disappointing, but I mean, I don't know what. I'm not an Evertonian, so I guess I don't have the right to really speak as much what their expectations are. But I think for some of the business, Jack Grealish looks good so far. And at Chelsea, we had Kiernan, whatever his name is, be all
Hmm.
last year. And he's a decent player, mate. I think he's a top player that could fit into an Everton team. He had like what, one or two assists so far, and I think Jack had two in one game the other day. So I think that first game was definitely a shock, but I think for Everton, like, I don't know if they're looking to be that team that we know them as. I think you're thinking about that time and when they were finishing sixth under David Moyes and stuff like that. They had Leighton Baines, all those top players were playing, Ross Barkley and those kind of players. But I don't know if that's their ambition nowadays. That's why I said I'd love to speak with an Evertonian and they can educate me a bit more. I think Brighton and Brentford and Newcastle, I don't want to disrespect anyone, but I feel like those teams are the team that's the new Everton. You know what I mean? Brighton is always the team. We talked about Fabian earlier. As much as how they're always kind of lulling on players and moving on players, they're always in and amongst that mix. You know what I mean? Like they sold this Caicedo a couple seasons ago, record British fee, and now you saw at the end of the season it didn't happen, but United was looking for Aleba, and they always continue to be up there. They're going to be a tough game when both of our teams play them. You know what I mean? So I don't know what Everton. I don't know what their ambition is, but I think those teams. I think for Everton, they'd have to focus on those teams first before they can do anything else. Because like a Brighton is very well run. A Brentford is right well run. Fulham, I know they didn't make much signing, but you see those teams are in and about. Yeah, I think it's going to be tough for Everton, but I think they can. David Moyes is a good manager. He's been around the block. He knows what he's doing. But it's going to be tough for sure.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I would love to kind of get an Everton fan's perspective on it. And until we do that, I guess we have to leave it at that for Everton. That's it for game week 1. Moving into game week 2, the first game of that game week was your Chelsea away to, I was going to say Upton Park for a second there, the London Stadium.
I'm in stadium with the bubbles.
Yes. 5-1 win. I watched most of this game, to be honest. And I thought, Chelsea looked good. I thought, they kind of did all the things that they're supposed to do, put away chances, could have had a few more, to be honest. West Ham looked really poor to me on the day. I mean, I kind of always have this sort of complication when people say that, a team looked poor and it's almost like you take away from the team that dominates and wins. And it's not to take
Mhm.
anything away from Chelsea, right? I think that, they played excellent from what I saw. I just think that West Ham kind of didn't really show anything. They had the one goal, and I know towards the end of the game they were trying to push a little bit more, but the game was so far out of reach at that point. So it's almost as if, the dynamic shifted and Chelsea knew that the game was done, and West Ham's kind of trying to just, kind of get a goal just for the sake of getting a goal, right? So I honestly was left disappointed by West Ham, but take nothing away from Chelsea. I thought Chelsea played really well to score 5 goals away to West Ham, which, based off the last couple years going to London Stadium, is kind of, you never know what you're going to get. You could end up getting a really tough game or you could end up getting one of these games, right? But I thought overall, good victory from Chelsea. I think that, they definitely, needed to come away with 3 points considering, how the game with Crystal Palace went. But excellent result, got some goals up on the board, get some points. I think great start for Chelsea, to be honest. What did you make of the game?
I made of the game. Like you said, I think West Ham is poor. I don't think it's taking anything away from Chelsea. West Ham looked poor that game. I don't know about other Chelsea fans. They can let me know, but I think it was a bit of a validation for us because I'm not a big hater of Graham Potter. I don't have any resentment or anything towards him. Actually, feel more sympathy towards him or anything because I felt like he was kind of putting out of his place when he came to Chelsea. But I think watching that game, gave us just that validation of like, yeah, I'm not sure if he was ever that guy for Chelsea, because like you said, I think West Ham looked all over the place that game. But I will say, as I said that, I also think goals change games. And the run of that game was a little bit because they went 1-0 up, right? And I think nobody in the stadium expected that. And you saw the bit of energy for like 5 minutes. And I believe we scored right away to equalize it, or couple minutes, and then they went up 2-1, but the goal was offside. I think it was, goals change game, and I think it would have been a different game had they got that goal, the second goal. I would have believed in Chelsea coming back. Maybe you would have seen a better show, but I think that after that second goal got dismissed for them, and then we went up the other end and scored two and three. I think, like you said, yeah, West Ham just looked for us. It was a very poor game. West Ham was not up to par that day. I don't know if it was start of this season or what it was, but I think from us we can only beat what's in front of us, right? So I was happy with the way we played. If we're gonna look at it for us, the only way we can look at it is trying to take positive. And we in the warm up we lost Cole Palmer and Esteval came in, 18 years old. I'm 28 now, so you and I both understand like we just came from that level, but to be 18 coming in and slotting in like nothing happened, so getting a 5-1 win, I think that was something good, especially from a young kid coming from a different country. So we're going to take the positives, but yeah, we can't deny the fact that I felt like on the day West Ham was pretty poor because they did have an improved performance. I watched them the week after. They won 3-0 against Brentford. They sat in, they defended like they should. I think against us, they were trying to play tit for tat, which, against the top six teams, when you're teams like that, I think it's a risky game when you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Great result. 3 points for Chelsea. Moving on through the week, I think that this game, I don't think this was the biggest game of the weekend in terms of hype for that weekend. I think, the Newcastle Liverpool, based off of everything that's going on off the pitch between those two clubs, I think probably would have taken the biggest game. But I think that the City Spurs game, I think that was probably the biggest result of the week, in my opinion, at
Hmm.
least. And not really, I wouldn't say too surprising, just, knowing the history between those two teams. It just seems like Spurs is Pep's kryptonite more often than not. They give
Hmm.
City so many problems, and I'm sure in years to come there'll be a science behind it, but I'm not sure that anyone sort of really understands it because, Spurs have been through at least 3, 4 managers in the time that Pep has been at City, and under all of those managers, they've always given City problems. So I don't think it was a crazy, surprising, and shocking result, but I definitely think it was the result of the weekend, in my opinion. Beating City at home 2-0 after they just thrashed Wolves 4-0 on the first game week, I think was more sort of just good that, is coming from the Spurs team and this new management and even, a few new players here and there. I really think that Kudus has all the potential to do really good at Spurs. I think, honestly, that was one of probably the best teams that he could have gone to where he can actually shine. And I know that Spurs have some injury problems in the midfield area and whatnot. I know that they brought in Paulinho on loan from Bayern. I think that's a great pickup for them in terms of kind of solidifying that midfield and add that defensive depth. And it seems like Thomas Frank prefers Richarlison up front to Solanke, so that's different from Ange right there. I think he got a couple goals the first game, and assists, I think, this game. So I mean, it's looking good for Spurs in the first two games, I'd say. But that's one thing I think with Spurs that a lot of people have reservations, including myself, is it looks good for a few games and then it breaks down, you know, and it goes through that cycle. And I think that if Thomas Frank can break that cycle, I think that Spurs will be a very serious top four team this year.
Yeah, I think it's early doors anyway. Like you said, I think they look good. I gave them the credit earlier, but still lots of games to play. I think they played after that. Did they lose?
I think they lost the third game week. They lost
Yeah.
one
Oh,
nil at home to Bournemouth.
yeah. So yeah, I think it's early doors. What we said was, or what we've been saying is, obviously last year with Ange, and our biggest question around Ange is his playing style, right? I think if Tottenham gets a manager like what we just discussed, like those Brightons and the Fulham, that's all Tottenham had needed was an astute manager, someone of their level that can help them to grow in whatever way they seem fit. And for now, we feel like Frank is one of those, probably one of the best candidates for that position, right? So I think obviously he's going to come in and strengthen them and make them a bit better, which they've shown them so far this season. But I think it's still early doors. I don't want to call anything too early because, I still think the midfield, whether everyone's fit or not, I still think that they have question marks a little bit more so. Like Kudus will be a good signing for them, but then Kudus can't play all 38 games, you know what I mean? So I think then there is question marks over the team when they do have to, like, for instance, if they get an injury or something happens, compared to, for instance, like the other top four teams right now. Can they be in the future with the structure that Frank will implement? Absolutely. But for this season, I still think there's a little bit of question mark. If Ramiro Van de Ven gets an injury, either one of the two, or if both of them gets an injury, then there's question mark over the defense again. Kudus is not playing. Right now, you see Madison is out for a bit. So I know they just signed Xavi and they just signed Paulinho, but still a lot more, if they start picking up 1 and 2 injuries, as you know, they're back in Champions League this season. So far it's good. Nothing less than I expected from Thomas. We saw him at Brentford. And, obviously Brentford, he has limited resource. So when he comes to Spurs, it's nothing less than I expected so far, but still early doors before I can say anything.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a great sort of opinion to have about it. I mean, it's a long season. It's early in. We're kind of analyzing the games and kind of looking to what they mean. But in retrospect, I mean, there's a lot more football to be played this year. But so far, I mean, for Spurs at least, I think it looks good, right? I'm excited to see sort of how, maybe like 15 games in around that December time where they are. And I think that will tell us a lot in terms of what's going on and how, Frank is as a manager, and the changes he's made to that team. But like you said, I mean, a couple injuries here and there, and it might be same old Spurs, right? So I think it's definitely one to watch. The next few results in that game week, I'll just list them off and we can kind of go over them. Bournemouth 1-0 at home over Wolves. Brentford 1-0 as well at home over Villa, and Burnley 2-0 at home to Sunderland. I'll be honest with you, I think the three of these games were on at the same time, and I watched the Burnley Sunderland game. I don't think 2-0 was a fair result. Sunderland kind of, in my opinion, dominated. Not, I wouldn't say dominated, but had a little bit more control of that game, and Burnley just kind of came out with with the first goal. And then the second goal came from a period of more Burnley dominance, I'd say. But the first goal was completely sort of against the run of play. So I don't know. I mean, I liked Sunderland the first game. I think Sunderland, like you said, added some Premier League experience, spent some serious money this summer. So I like their chances. But failed to Burnley, obviously at Burnley. So, that there's a little bit of context there, but I wouldn't say too worrying for Sunderland, even though these are kind of the games that they'll be looking to pick up most of their points, to be honest, to stay in the league as teams in and around them. But based off of their performance, I don't think that they, obviously it's a loss, right? But I don't think that they will be too worried from this loss, in my opinion, at least. And then Brentford, Villa, I don't really know what to make of Brentford. I mean, losing Thomas Frank, like we said, who's the manager now? There, Keith Andrews. I don't
Yeah,
really
keep that.
know what to make of him. I don't know too much about him, to be honest. But Brentford is one to kind of see too. See, where are they going to go? What are they going to do? They lost two of their best players, right? And one of, if not their best midfielders. I don't know what signings came in there, but definitely need replacements. You lost, I don't know how many goals we saw and Buemo had between the two of them, but you got to replace that, right? But beating Villa, I mean, Villa's just had an atrocious start to the season. I mean, they did manage a draw with 10 men to Newcastle on the first game week, losing on the second game week, and I think they lost on the third game week too. I don't really know where they're headed. I mean, they have European football too, right? So that squad's got to start performing, and I don't know what type of depth they have for that either. And then the Bournemouth game, I thought Bournemouth looked good against Liverpool. I know we didn't really touch too much on it, but they looked good against Liverpool. I mean, they kind of went head to head with Liverpool, and they could have managed a draw in that game, bar some just lapses in concentration and just taking their foot off the pedal a little bit towards the end of that game and conceding 2 late goals to Liverpool. I thought that they looked, pretty good. Semenyo looks excellent. I mean, probably, one of the best players outside of that top,
Top
6.
six.
Yeah, I'd say definitely one of the best players outside of the top 6. So, good result for Bournemouth, bad result for Wolves. I think Wolves are 0-3 in their first 3 games, so, you kind of have to put them in the early, relegation contender. I know it's very early days, but they're just they lost one of their best players too. How do you replace that and his influence in the team and his goals? So I think there's a lot to kind of wait and see what's going on with those teams.
I was gonna ask that for Villa because I feel like for Villa and for Wolves, I don't know if we should be worried. I was gonna ask that question because Villa has 1 point from 3. And I know, like you said, we don't know. I don't know anything about Keith Andrews. So obviously I have to give him more time to kind of see what happens there. But I think Villa 1 point in 3 games, and then Wolves also 0 points in 3 games for people that's been in the league is definitely worrying. So I watched the Brentford game and Villa. It could have gone anyway, but I think it's still concerning that Villa hasn't picked up any points in 3 games. So I think that's a bit concerning. But like we said, it's also 3 games in, so nothing to really be worried about. The Burnley Sunderland game, I only seen the highlights, so not too much myself, to be honest with you. You said it went against a run of play. I can't see too much, but I think for Burnley and for Sunderland, they would, in that situation, they feel very much the same. I think those teams that just got promoted would feel like each other can take points off. Anyone can take points off each other, I should say. So I think in that sense, there, Iriola, man, has always been a good coach. He's one of those. He's the next, like Thomas Frank. So I think I'm never worried about Bournemouth and the way Bournemouth looks or anything because I think he won't losing some of his best players because he lost Dean Hoyson this summer and then he also lost Kirkez. I still think they look, like you said, against Liverpool, gave Liverpool a competition and I watched him the other day. Semenyo is always going to look, But I think on top of that, I think Uriela is just showing that he's a top coach. We got a couple of those in the league. Brighton always has. Brighton had the Zerbi and stuff, but I think Uriela is showing that. That's why I said for Everton, it's going to be something for them. They're gonna have to look that level first before they think anything else because those teams I think has earned the right, like Bournemouth has earned the right to be in the middle of the team, the table. Not earn it, but you know what I mean. Every season they're fighting and they're gonna give you a good game no matter who it is. Even with the Liverpool scored the last minute, what 112 minute. So yeah, I think those teams. I'm happy for Bournemouth. Low key, always happy when I see Bournemouth and Brighton doing well. And I'm a little bit concerned for Villa and Wolves.
I share your concern for those two as well. Arsenal leads 5-0 to Arsenal. I think there was a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot of excitement, but I think that this was a game where I think the majority of Arsenal fans would have felt, you know what, yeah, we're kind of performing how we should. A lot of context in that, right? It's Leeds, it's a newly promoted side, but I think it was a good game. Did not start out that way. I think the first like 15, I'd say 20 minutes was kind of a little bit of a hangover from the United game. Kind of went the same sort of way. Like it was a lot of passing around and not really threatening. But once the first goal came in, they just kind of started flowing, and I think it was a good game. I think it was good to see Gyökeres on the score sheet. Definitely get some goals. I think that was good. I think probably the biggest takeaway from that game was the Saka injury. Right, that's a big injury for Arsenal. Most highly influenced players in that team. So I think that was big. I still don't know how long. I've heard some reports that, he's back in training or whatever, but hopefully it's not too long term from an Arsenal perspective. We did get to see the 15-year-old get on the field and He's one of those players that just looks exciting. I mean, at his age, you and I know very well at 15 years old to be kind of at that or competing in that level. I mean, he came on, I think it was like the 64th minute, so he got a decent amount of playing time, right? And I know
Hmm.
Arsenal were up 4-0 at that time, but still to come on at that time and get a good 30 minutes in against, Premier League team in actual real Premier League competition is a big kind of achievement for someone of that age. And he came on, he did well, he won a penalty, but yeah, I think overall, I mean, it was a good game for Arsenal. I don't think we learned anything about Arsenal in that game, to be honest, or at least we didn't learn anything we didn't already know, right? I don't think that it was necessarily, Arsenal have reinvented this new way of breaking down the low block just because I don't think Leeds really sat low, um, or that low, I should say, throughout the game. So I think they were a little bit more open than I expected them to be, just because newly promoted away to the Emirates. But hey, that's the price you pay for playing that game, right? You kinda have to be spot on. I don't know if you got a chance to watch the game or not, but I didn't really think that we learned too much from the game, right? I think the only thing we learned is, the Gyökeres goal, the first goal where he cuts inside. I think that was, a good solo goal by him, so I think seeing him do that in the Premier League was promising, I'd say. But yeah, I think that it was just a good victory. Nothing really more than that, to be honest.
Yeah, I watched the game. I think it was similar to the West Ham game, like we said. You have to beat, but I think for Arsenal now this season, your main focus has to be those things. You know what I mean? Winning as much as you can, goal differential and stuff like that. If you're going for the title, those are the thing might matter as well. So I think, like you said, to get your striker in, a striker that you guys wanted, you're pretty much your first and last choice, and to get him on the score sheet and to get, because especially us that played in the attacking position while we were younger, I think you know how it is. Just to break that duck early, man, it gives you just a different kind of confidence. So I think if not learning anything like the West Ham game, you have to take positive. It's a Premier League. You're never gonna not that you're never, but you barely ever win 5-0 throughout the season, the 38 game season. So I think whenever you can get a 5-0, you have to take it, or 5 goals, or whatever the case might be, and go, because you know how difficult the rest of it can be. So good performances. It's good to see the 15-year-old. But I think one thing I like about Arteta, and it's not just Arteta, I think it's an Arsenal thing. I have to give them credit, but they've been one of those clubs that's always, even on the big stage, from the Cesc Fabregas and all those little players that you can think about. When he was young, I remember I was a big fan. You know how much I loved Arsenal before he went to Liverpool. But I think Arsenal's always been, they've always has a couple of gem players like that within their youth academy, and they've always kind of like, give them the spotlight to kind of shine. And I think if nothing came from the game is, I think within Arsenal, I knew the other one that's at Liverpool right now, Rio, is he came from the Chelsea academy, so I had an idea of who he is. But I think now Arsenal is showing, especially for English people, that some good talents coming out. It's just long may it continue, because he looks like a good player, like you said, at 15. We played all the way from we were young. To think about us at 15 playing with that maturity, I think it's some credit. So yeah, it was a good game. I think it was a decent game. The result reflected how it was supposed to be. I mean, for Leeds, right? I think it's a couple things. That is also welcome back to the Premier League. You know what I mean? Like for their manager, because I think, like you said, for you as a manager, you can want to come and want to play your style and stuff, but then you have to understand what it comes with. You know what I mean? Or what the consequences of that's gonna be. So yeah, it's a little bit kind of like welcome back to Premier League, in my opinion. If you're gonna play that way, you better be ready to have the players to play that way. And I'm sure Leeds will take something from it.
Yeah. Yeah. Moving on, the 3 games on Sunday, Palace Forest 1-1, Everton Brighton 2-0, Fulham United 1-1. I think that for me, all sort of, I mean, each one of those games kind of was important in its own way. Palace Forest, I mean, that was the battle of Europa League, right?
Yeah,
you
the two
know
manager with Nuno.
yeah, yeah,
The Greek Suge Knight, mate.
I think it was I don't know how true this is, but I've heard that the reason that Palace actually got removed from Europa League was because Forest outlined or complained about it. I think
Yeah,
that I heard that if they hadn't
yeah,
complained, they wouldn't have been removed. So I think
yeah,
there was a
yeah.
lot of animosity there in that game. And 1-1, I think, probably was a fair result. I didn't
Mhm.
watch too much of the game, but from what I saw and then the people I've spoken to about it, I think, it was a fair result. Everton beating Brighton 2-0, I think was kind of I wanna say a shock to us just based off of, like, what we know and sort of what we've already discussed about both of those teams, but I think it's a great result for Everton, right? Their first game in their new stadium. I don't even know what they're calling it, but great result. 2-0. I think Grealish ended up getting 2 assists, if I'm not mistaken, in that game. Brighton, I think it was kind of a shock. Not necessarily a shock, but I think this is the thing that these mid-table teams have is they'll have a good victory, and then
Mhm.
they'll turn around and just have a poor game, and I think that that is why the Premier League is so difficult, and it's such a hard thing to break out of for any team, not just a mid-table team or a lower end, but even the top teams. I mean, there are some teams like we discussed Spurs, Spurs will have a run of good games, and then they'll go and lose a couple, and that's what kind of really holds them or has held them back the last couple of years from breaking into that top 4, right? So I think that's what makes the Premier League so beautiful, but also so difficult, right? But good result for Everton overall. Fulham United was
Dixon Stadium, by the way. Sorry to cut
Hill
you off.
Dixon. Yeah, what a name. Fulham United for me, I didn't watch this whole game, but I watched bits and pieces of it. And I honestly thought that this looked like United from last year. That was kind of my thinking the whole game. I was, seeing how well they performed against Arsenal to go away to Craven Cottage and kind of just show what they were last year. I think I don't want to say it's a step back, but I think it's definitely something that they have to improve on. And again, there's context to that as well, right? It's an away game. Craven Cottage, Fulham is not any pushover team, right? They can give a game to anybody on their day, right? But I think it was a little bit disappointing from, I'm sure from a United fan's perspective. But that was the 3 games on Sunday. Any thoughts on those? What are your takeaways?
Yeah, my takeaway, I watched a United game as well, and I watched United, and I think United was absolutely poor. I think even the build up in the goal, if I'm not mistaken, I believe could have been a foul because I remember they called something back on Everton. I need to kind of watch the game again to refresh myself. And I think it was a very similar foul or push in the back as they called on Fulham. And yeah, so I think United looked back to old United, like you said, and I think that was more a disappointment on their side than anything because everybody was kind of looking forward to for United to kind of, step into that, like, be better this season, I guess. We all had the same anticipation, I guess, all summer thinking with the signings that they couldn't be any worse. But like we said, a couple games in, so we have to give them some time. I think my thing is, I have one theory is that I know that United is not at the top, so I'm not gonna pressure them on terms of being at the top or, making stuff at the top. But I think their signings, my one thing is I don't think their signings are thought through at all. And I think for a club like that wants to go back, I think they have to be thought through. I think there's little finer details, little things that they could focus on to get, I wouldn't say more Man United kind of player, if that made sense. And I think even this summer they failed themselves again. So let's see how the season goes. But yeah, I think United was very poor. Back to being old United versus Fulham. I think Fulham deserved it. They should have won that game.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good point that you make, to be honest. I don't think that United had made United tight, and I don't want to say quality, right? I want to say more so like you said, like players that fit the club and their ambition and their style of play. I don't think they've made a single signing post Ferguson era that you can say this is a United player that's gonna come in and sort of fit the club and everything the club stands for and the history of the club and the way that the club is trying to go. I honestly I agree with you 100% on that. I don't think they've made one signing. Maybe you can argue Bruno, right? And I'm a fan of Bruno. I think Bruno is a great player, but I think you have to kind of play around him, right? Like any great player, right? And I watched that United team and I can't help but think that that's where it is. And even now kind of, his position being moved back a little bit, I feel like it almost voids him as a player, right? Like he can't show his strengths deeper in that midfield, right? I think his strengths is playing in the number 10 position, having players run off of him, players that he can feed wide or through the center, linking up the play. And I think the deeper back he is, the less he can do that. So it's honestly to me, it's kind of I don't understand. I don't get it yet. I honestly don't think that, for me personally at least, I don't think that it's a good transition to move him further back. I think that, you get sort of like an Mbeumo and a Cunha who are players that can run and run in behind the lines. And, these are players that you want Bruno Fernandes feeding from the center. But the way that United is setting up is these players are coming into the center to get the ball, and they're not always out wide because of the wing back. So I'm curious to see how it works out. Like you said, it's early days, but I 100% agree with you that I just don't think that United are really thinking through their signings. The last game sort of think I mentioned had probably the biggest buildup coming into this weekend um, for the Isak transfer saga. And I think that the game kind of I didn't watch all of the game, but it had drama throughout the game. I mean, a red card that I thought was a red card for sure. I mean,
Definitely a red card.
yeah, I
One of
don't,
the most silly red card
yeah,
I've ever seen in the stakes of the game.
yeah. I was absolutely just gonna say that. I think it was the most needless challenge. I mean,
Nothing
it's
needed to be done there, mate.
absolutely, absolutely. I think that really hurt Newcastle. I think with 11 players on the pitch, I'm not gonna say Liverpool wouldn't have won, but I think the game would have gone a little bit differently. But, Newcastle managed to get 2 past Liverpool with 10 men. So I think that
Yeah, yeah.
there's some
Still
context in
credit,
that.
still credit to Newcastle for almost equalizing and getting a draw, getting a point with 10 men in terms of what we just discussed as one of the most needless challenges I've ever seen. I understand pressing and you have to go and get your guy, but I felt like the ball's on Van Dijk's opposite foot. There's no need for you to raise your foot there or anything because you're not getting any ball.
Absolutely.
So definitely a red. But I think in terms of like what we said earlier, right? I think we might discuss this a lot on the show, but just the maturity of players, like the maturity of understanding the moment of what you're in. It's Newcastle versus Liverpool. It's all of those that's wrapped into that moment. And you're just trying to put a marker down just to show, you are Newcastle. You can't be played with and you make a needless challenge like that. But I think still credit to Eddie Howe and his 10-man Newcastle team because they did a phenomenal job of almost holding out for a point until the end there. And we spoke about it earlier. I think whatever way you want to summarize it, but that's what wins you title in it. Because I think I remember Chelsea had it a couple of years back and there's a famous quote from Jurgen Klopp where he's like, "You defend for 90 minutes and give the ball to Eden Hazard." Wow. But those are the players that the different players, the different makers, whatever you want to think about them. So I think in the end, there it's Salah making the difference. That's what makes winners. At the end of when this season comes, if Liverpool wins a title again this season, no one will be talking about if they played bad that game or how they conceded 2 goals. They would just be talking about the winner. Hate it or not, I think credit to Newcastle because they did well, but Liverpool found their way, which they have been, unfortunately, for the past like a couple seasons. But it's we all would want that in our team, like you said, winning or not. If you Arsenal wins, no one remember the first game at the end of the big season if they played, United or whatever the case might be. So
Yeah,
that's the difference, I guess, with those big teams.
absolutely. I think that, that's something that, takes us into the 3rd game week and, that, the game between Liverpool and Arsenal. I watched that game and obviously, I think, the first half Arsenal had a little bit better of a half. I don't think that it was that much better to say that, Arsenal deserved to be ahead or anything like that, but I think that they played a little bit better, they controlled the ball a little bit better. And then I couldn't help but think at halftime, you gotta get a goal in those spells where you're controlling the game a little bit more against a team like Liverpool just because of the fact that based off of their history, and I mean, even last season, but, even their first 2 games this season, right? They're games that are not necessarily Liverpool are running away with. They're evenly matched games, and then in the end, Liverpool find a way to win. And I think that's what won them the title last year, right? Is those games that were sort of evenly matched, or Liverpool was struggling to break down. They just at the end, it was like a flip of a switch, and you turn Salah on, and he has a magical run where he cuts inside and he finishes the ball, right? That or a penalty given to them. But I couldn't help but think at halftime that Liverpool's gonna find a way to get a goal. And I remember I was actually in the middle of eating lunch and watching the game at the same time, and that free kick popped up, and I looked over to who I was watching the game with, and I said to them, I said, this is gonna go in. And I had a feeling that it was that Liverpool moment where they they find a way to do it. And sure enough, Szoboszlai just hit a rocket and it went in. And I saw after the game, I saw a lot of like questions in terms of like the wall and Raya's positioning and all that. And I think it was a brilliant hit. I mean, it went in off the post. I honestly don't fault the goalkeeper at all in that. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong in that, but it's a brilliant hit. I know it's far out. Maybe if he's standing a little bit more central, he can get a hand on it, but I don't think that you can kind of really look at that and take anything away from it. So I think Liverpool have that sort of, or at least right now they have that sort of last 10-minute just drive, and until it runs out, right? Like you said, it doesn't matter what happens in 80 minutes. It matters what happens at the end when the final whistle is blown. So, um, 9 points from the first 3 games for Liverpool, they're definitely going to take it, right? And like you said, we're going to look back to this game in May, and no one's going to really think about how it was an evenly matched game and whatnot. All that's going to matter is where the points went. So I think Liverpool are just in that mode right now where they're getting those results. But, I guess we'll start with sort of the earlier games, and we can come back to that game towards the end. All right, so the results in the third match week were Chelsea at home to Fulham, 2-0 victory for Chelsea there. United at home to Burnley, 3-2 victory for United there. Sunderland at home to Brentford, 2-1 victory for them. Spurs at home to Bournemouth, a 1-0 loss for Spurs. Wolves at home to Everton, a 3-2 loss for Wolves. Leeds at home to Newcastle, a 0-0 draw there. Then going into Sunday, and we're home to Manchester City, 2-1 victory for Brighton. Forest were home to West Ham, a 3-0 loss for Forest there. Liverpool home to Arsenal, a 1-0 victory for Liverpool, and Villa were home to Crystal Palace, a 3-0 victory for Crystal Palace there. I guess starting sort of in chronological order there, Chelsea was the first game of the match week. 2-0 victory for them. I know that there was a bit of controversy in that one, but I kind of watched this game and I thought Chelsea looked good. I didn't really have any criticism for them. What was your take on it? I know you probably have a more in-depth analysis of that game.
It was a good game, obviously, with the controversy on the halfway line there, leading to I think his name is Josh King's goal that got disallowed was a big talking point of that week. But yeah, I think overall a good game. I think the call could have went either way, honestly, as a Chelsea fan, because I could see the fact of where should he put his feet when he's like, he wasn't really looking at the player. So I don't think it was intentional. But at the same time, I also understand that then that would also give other players freedom to just put their feet anywhere when they're stepping. So I don't know. I think I get Fulham frustrations for sure. But I think on the day, we were definitely deserved winners. I don't think it was anything where besides that, it was kind of one of those. And then the second goal kind of went against them again. I think it was a frustrating day for Marco Silva because I watched the whole game and saw him on the sidelines. But I mean, above all, frustrating decision because I've been there, so I'm not going to be hypocritical about it. But at the end, I think and no one can disagree that Chelsea deserved to win, but you feel for Fulham for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I sort of agree with you that that foul, I think it was around the halfway line or so. I honestly thought watching it back and, obviously we've seen so many different angles and slow motion, regular speed and all that. And I think Fulham can feel hard done by, but me personally, I feel like it could go either way, right? You can see it as the attacker sort of protecting the ball and defender making a challenge. Um, or you can see it as the attacker sort of impeding the defender's ability to make a challenge. So I honestly think it can go either way. Again, I think Fulham can feel hard done by, but that's just the nature of the game, right? You're always going to have some of these challenges or decisions that you feel can go either way. And sometimes they go in your favor, sometimes they don't. And I think that's just normal, right? Natural. The stats sort of piggyback off of what you said. I think the expected goals for Chelsea was 2.35, and for Fulham it was 1.02. So definitely, showing some dominance for Chelsea there. Total shots for Chelsea 13 to Fulham's 11, and on target 6 for Chelsea to Fulham's 3. I think overall, like you said, very good game. Chelsea deserved winners in my opinion. There was one thing I wanted to ask you about is that Liam Delap injury. I think he got injured early on in this game. What is your take on that? How do you feel in terms of, and I don't even know sort of how serious the injury is or how long he's going to be out, but how do you feel that impacts Chelsea and their season in these next few weeks?
I don't think was it that game or the West Ham game?
No, no, I think it was in this game that he came out in the 14th minute, replaced by Tyreek George.
Okay, got my games mixed up there. But I think for us, the big thing is it's gonna go back to like last season again, because I mean, I watched João Pedro this summer in the Club World Cup. I think my instant take on him was he is very good, but he doesn't play as an out and out striker. You know what I mean? I watched him, even if you watch the goal against PSG where he scored, or the goal, not even the goal where he scored. Let's look at the second goal, the run that he made for Cole Palmer, if you've seen the highlights there. You can see him. I know we were defending, but he's coming almost from behind Cole Palmer. So I think Liam Delap injury is going to be honestly a big miss for us because, stretching teams that play the low block and stuff always been a challenge for us. So I think Liam was a good, even if he wasn't scoring, he was somebody up there occupying that back line and give us more space to do what we wanted to do with the Cole Palmers and João Pedros. We will see how it goes. It depends on the teams we play because I think when we play a team in the future that opens up, you won't miss it as much, but I think you will see it for sure in the games that we play low blocks and stuff like that. So I think it will be a big miss, but I also hope that Spanish guy that we called back, he's a young kid, probably about 90, he can step in and help us in that role. We also have Tyreek George, but he's a left winger, honestly. So everything he does up there is not going to be natural for him, but we'll see. Hopefully it's not a quick injury, but hopefully he gets back and he's healthy and he can help us because I think it's going to be definitely a miss for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I just kind of wanted to get your take on it, sort of how you feel, the pecking order at Chelsea's going to go. And I think Liam Delap is a good player. I think there's definitely lots of potential there, and he has sort of that like almost bully like striker mentality or approach, where it's like you put him there and he's just going to cause some issues for the defense, right? He can run in behind, he can hold the ball up. So like you said, I think that it will be a miss, because I agree with you. I don't think that João Pedro, not that I don't think he can play there. I think he can definitely play there, but I think there are certain qualities that you look for in a center forward that maybe he doesn't have, sort of like that bulliness. He's more sleek and sort of in between the lines. I definitely think that, if Liam Delap is going to play there and sort of he's going to play off of him or something, if they play at the same time, and that's the direction Chelsea's going in while he's out, I don't think that João Pedro will not necessarily be able to sort of maintain it by himself. I think, he'll do great. I think he's a good finisher. He's a powerful runner with the ball, and honestly, I think Chelsea kind of really got a steal with him. So I don't necessarily see too many issues, in terms of, I guess, playing without Liam Delap, but I definitely think that he's, a very, very good option to have. Moving on from that game, the next game, the United Burnley game, 3-2 victory for United, their first victory of the season at home to a newly promoted side. This game was kind of strange. I watched bits and pieces of this game, and my overall take was basically it kind of was a mess for United again. I'm just not sure sort of the direction that this team is going in. Again, with the new signings and all, we've already spoke about all of that, but you want to see their home newly promoted side. You want to see them kind of put their emphasis on them, right? Sort of like how we saw in the Arsenal game at home to Leeds, right? And again, United and Arsenal are two different levels, but you want to see some sort of dominance, right? It doesn't have to be insane amount, but you want to see something where it's like you're kind of putting your foot down. You're like, hey, welcome to the Premier League, right? Or welcome back. But I didn't think there was any of that. I think United kind of looked the same. I think that they were a little lucky to get a penalty at the end there. If I remember correctly, I think it was a controversial decision, but I still think that it was a penalty. I mean, you have to be careful in the Premier League or in the box, right? Any sort of like pull, any sort of contact can be conceived as a foul, right? Or it can be even manipulated to look like a foul. In the Premier League, we've seen this over, the last few years, especially is in the box, it's almost like the game is kind of refereed a little bit differently. But I did think that it was a penalty. I think United got lucky, very lucky to get that penalty at the end. I think it was like in the 90 plus something minutes. So I thought that they were disappointing, to be honest, but 3 points is 3 points, and I guess they move on into the fourth match week.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, I don't think we can expect the Arsenal performance out of United, if I'm being 100% honest with you. I mean, we all know that, but I think the one disappointing thing from United was everyone expected better days this year. And so far, one of my biggest criticism, I don't know if anyone else share this, and I'm could be proven wrong, but I think we spoke about this a little bit, but I'm just gonna, I guess, reiterate this as much as I can. Watching that game, them struggle against a good, I mean, Scott Parker and Burnley is a good team, but I don't know if they signed the right players. I will continue to question that until I see, because I think you gave them a free hit. Well, we gave them a free hit, or most of the world did last season. Ruben Amorim coming in, but I think you expect not an Arsenal performance. I don't expect a 5-0 from them, but you expect better days, like you said, not necessarily dominance, but a structure to see what they're about this season. They won the game, but overall, I think still concerning for United and Amorim, to be fair.
Yeah, absolutely, and I agree with you, right? I'm like, we're not looking for them to be, like one of these top teams where they're insanely dominating or killing their opponent, but just sort of something that you can kind of look to and say, okay, that's a step in the right direction, right? And it's hard to find those. It seems like it's just more of what's been going on. But to touch base on Burnley a little bit, I don't think we've really discussed them much, but I think watching this game, I think that Scott Parker has them set up where they're not looking bad. Like they're looking different to me than what they looked like sort of in their previous spells in the Premier League, right? They look more sort of set to play against an opponent, right? And I think that for these, especially for these like lower teams, right? Smaller teams, and no disrespect to them, but I think that they have to have that approach, right? They have to be able to play against an opponent to sort of match them up or play to, I guess, to get something out of the game, right? And I think Burnley is looking like that to me. I mean, I know it's early days, but they're looking a little bit more solid in terms of how they set up, how they approach these games, right? They got the victory over Sunderland in the second match week at home, which, are games, like we mentioned, that they should expect to get points from, or those are the games that they should look to get points from to stay in the league. Bar a late penalty that they conceded in this game, they would have had a point at Old Trafford, which I guess in the last few years is not some insane thing to mention, but still for them, it would have been a good point to pick up. So I think that they're looking good. You know, they're looking like they're ready for the Premier League. And again, it's early days, but just sort of like an early take on them.
Yeah, for sure. I think we can't discredit for Burnley, obviously. A pretty tricky start, I would say, to have Tottenham, Sunderland. Well, they came up together, but Tottenham, United, and Liverpool within your first pretty much couple match week is pretty difficult, you know. So I think for Burnley, with Scott Parker, he's always been one of those, you know, very good managers to those teams. And nowadays, as we said, football's improving. I've always felt like Scott Parker and those kind of managers, you know, you give them decent kind of players, which Burnley have, they're going to have a good setup, which Burnley is showing so far. So I think Burnley for sure will be exciting to watch. Out of their first couple games to pick up 3 points is still, you know, it's still a good return for them. So it's a tough loss. They played well in that game as well, I think. You know, United celebration at the end there, I think showed everything, what that means and whatnot. But yeah, for Burnley, I think Burnley will be exciting to watch this season.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on to one of the fellow newly promoted teams, Sunderland Brentford. I didn't watch this game, but sort of just looking at the statistics and what it is, right? Um, it you know, a 2-1 victory for Sunderland over Brentford, who's been in the Premier League for a while now. I think we mentioned this previously, but Brentford, I think, will sort of struggle. You know, losing some of their biggest goal threats, and I know that they brought in new players to replace them, but they're not. These players are not necessarily proven in the Premier League, so it's going to be a little bit difficult for them. But Sunderland getting 3 points to Brentford, I think, is a great result for them. They had 54% possession over Brentford. Their expected goals were bigger than Brentford's 1.54 to 1.2. The total shots 12-7, so outplayed in that. So I think overall, a good victory for Sunderland. I know Brentford missed a penalty, which, you know, could have changed sort of the outcome of it, but you can only kind of what you're given, right? A 2-1 victory, 3 points. I think Sunderland take that and move on, you know, without even kind of looking back. So good victory for them. Great victory, in my opinion.
I think just to piggyback, I watched the highlights, and just to get an in-depth more version of what happened. Sunderland looks like we said, man. Sunderland bought, you know, Gannett Jaffa in the middle. That's Premier League experience, and then they added some good players. I like the two center backs. They look like, you know, decent center backs for the Premier League. And comparing to what we just said about Burnley, right? Like we're saying, hey, Burnley is good for them to pick up points against who was it, Sunderland last week because they were fellow rival. But this is Sunderland picking up points against a Premier League side. You know, even though we say they're going to struggle this season, they're still a Premier League side. So if you can, like for those are extra points for them. Not extra points, but you know what I mean. Those are you're expected to fight with what's in and amongst you. And then if you can beat a team in the top half, like a Brentford, you know, whoever the case might be, one of the top six as well, I think that's good for them. So a good return. Like we said, I think Brentford missing some of their key players, they will struggle. And also, we have to remember in the game that Brentford did also miss a penalty in those change games. I think a good win for Sunderland, that 2-1. From the highlights of the game, it's not exaggerating their win. But yeah, you know, like we said, any day you can get 3 points for those teams, it's going to be a good day, especially against a team that's been in the Premier League for a little while now. So I think it's a good result for Sunderland.
Absolutely. One of you and I's favorite teams to watch in this league, Bournemouth, away to Spurs with a 1-0 victory. I didn't watch this game, to be honest. I didn't even watch the highlights, but going off of the stats, it looks like Bournemouth completely dominated Spurs. Spurs had the possession, but they had 20 shots away to Tottenham, and Tottenham's 5 shots in total. That's an insane stat. To have 20 shots away to Spurs and then only have 5, 6 on target for Bournemouth, 1 for Spurs, and beating them out on the expected goals by an insane margin as well. I know that we said Thomas Frank is going to come into Spurs and kind of change it a little bit, but I think that this kind of shows us that it's not going to be an immediate change all around, right? I think Spurs will have some of these one-odd results this year just because of who they are and the players they have, right? I think it's going to take some time, like it does for any managers, to kind of have their input. Very good result for Bournemouth. I think Bournemouth is one of those teams that, depending on how the season goes, if they can, you know, keep their players fit and sort of keep some of their best players, especially in the January transfer window. I think that they'll have a really good year. I see them definitely finishing in the top half for sure, and maybe even closer to those early European places, whether it be the Conference League or the Europa League. And we've praised Iriola enough already, but I mean, he's a really good manager. I think that he's doing a great job there.
Mate, listen, couple things from this. We praise Iraola, right, every week and how we think highly of him and whatnot. So I don't think we can take it as one of those like off result. I think Iraola is just a top manager. And I watched the game on the day, and there's a couple players in that 11 that could walk out with their head high. I think the goalie did well on the day. I think he saved them. Sorry. Anyone at that back four, all the way to Richarlison up front could have been. Even Kudus was a bit disappointing on the day. So I think that doesn't go to say disappointing. I think Iraola is just a good manager, after someone that lost pretty much his whole back line last season. Bournemouth as a club that is not a top club that keeps their players. So if someone comes knocking, they have to go, and he continuously finds ways and system to go. So just system to implement to make his players look good. So you have to give credit to him, but I think it can't be something like that. It's going to be seen as Thomas Frank either failing, I think it's a couple games in, and yeah, like you said, he said it himself, and we all know they will lose football matches, and it's Tottenham at the end of the day. Nothing to disrespect, but I think, the squad also, there's question with the squad. They have a good squad, but they did lose 22 games last season. There's still work to do for Thomas Frank. I'm sure he knows that. He's figuring that out himself as he goes. I don't think it's disrespect or something for Spurs, right? I think it's just football, like we said all the time. Like, too good manager, Areola, that's been at his team for a little bit longer, and his style is more implemented. And Thomas Frank, that's still, as good as how the first couple games went. He's still figuring out his Spurs team and his best. So yeah, I think it was a good game. And it definitely a deserved win for Bournemouth.
Yeah, kind of all the points you made are very valid, right? It's gonna take time. Bournemouth is not really a pushover team. They're gonna give, I think, any team they play this season trouble. So definitely one to watch out for. Moving on, Wolves, Everton, 3-2 victory for Everton. It's tough times, I'd say, at Wolves for sure. I really don't know where they're headed, but it does not seem like it's anywhere that their fans want to see. Jack Grealish with a pair of assists again. He's you know, he kind of he's playing like he has freedom, right? And, makes you wonder why, what was going on at City for him to not be performing the way he is. I'm excited to watch Grealish at Everton this year. I think if he has a good year, I definitely think he'll get into that World Cup squad for England, and we might even see him start on that left wing. I know the competition on the left wing is not great, but if he performs like this, I think that he might definitely have a great shot at taking that position. What are your thoughts on this?
Of course, I watched the game. I just want to say that guy Beto, I have problems with you, man. I took that man out the Friday or the week before my FPL because he didn't score, and he went and scored that game. So I was very frustrated watching that game. I think I will be keeping a close eye on Everton this year, because one of my guys that scored that game is Drewsby Hall. He came from Chelsea last season, and I think it was just like, those players in the squad, doesn't play that much, but he never really fussed or anything, was really a good player. And I think we're sharing it now. I don't know if he forced a move to Leeds, but even with Fakunde Buonanotte, right? Okay, I think he's a good player, and I remember him from Brighton. I think he has quality and whatnot, and I'm sure he'll prove that this season. I think us getting him on loan, I mean, maybe it worked out for the better for financial reason, right? But I think could have kept Drewsby Hall, but happy for him. I watch a game. Like you said, I think it's worrying time for Wolves and Aston Villa, man. It's just been a tough time. But very happy for Grealish as well. Yeah, I think it's always questionable for the left side for England, isn't it? Because I think England in general, honestly, I don't know if sometimes it's just too much pressure on those players, or it's a mixture of when it comes to Grealish, right? I think we put Grealish in kind of the same category. People can argue or let me know how they feel about this, but I put Grealish in the same category as a Hazard. I know Hazard's body failed him, but there's a certain player, you and I, if you know what it is. It's okay to go to a winning team, but sometimes it's nothing like being that guy on your team. You know what I mean? So it's like you can go to a winning team and be just another guy, which, hey, don't get me wrong, at City he won, loads of trophy. I think he won the treble. So it wasn't a bad time for him there. But in terms of performance output and us wanting to see Grealish, I think especially with Pep Guardiola knowing the manager that he is, right? We are never gonna get that from Grealish that much. I think the game is changing a bit now. I think Pep is realizing he changed the game, but I think he also realized that the game is changing a bit now. So you see the Doku and the Savinos, which was the early Grealish and the Raheem Sterling. I mean, he did have Raheem Sterling young, but I think we also saw that Raheem Sterling less dribbling and just more, decisive in the box and stuff like that. So I think it's just a way of how the situation went for Grealish. And unfortunate, now he's at Everton where he has the responsibility to be that guy again for that team. So you're going to see more of that Grealish that we know. If his body can keep up with it, that's something we have to see as the season goes on. Yeah, I think, like we know those kind of players, like we said, like Hazard, I think, in my opinion, I'm a Chelsea fan. He left, went to Madrid, and I think it was kind of the same thing. Like, yeah, you want to play for Madrid and they're probably the biggest team in the world. But there's just nothing like sometimes for those players being that player at your team, you know what I mean? And I think a lot of players sometimes they get, I wouldn't say above themselves because we all have ambition, right? We all want to be the best. We all want to play for the best and represent the best. But I think sometimes we don't appreciate that little thing that much. So not to discredit Grealish because the trophy that he won speaks for himself. But if we're looking for players, I think those players like a Semenyo, if we take Semenyo out right now to go to any big team, I think he'll change as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. I think it's kind of rejuvenating for him and refreshing to be that guy again, which he was at Villa, right? And I think it's always difficult for some of those players who play on those teams like Villa to kind of move and go to these bigger teams and sort of the culture and the atmosphere and I think also the expectation too. I mean, when you're at City, right, or Real Madrid, Barcelona, these like big teams, the expectation is just immense, right? You're expected to perform week in and week out, and not just perform, but also have an output, right? When these teams are spending millions and millions just to have you come play for their team, you're expected to give a goal or an assist every game. A game without a goal or an assist, especially for the attacking players, is a disappointment, right? So I think that there's a lot that comes with it. But I'm happy for Grealish. I hope he does well at Everton. I'm looking forward to watching him the rest of the year. Moving on to Leeds Newcastle, a 0-0 draw. I honestly don't have much for this game, in my opinion. I think good point for Leeds. Any points that they pick up are good points. And Newcastle being sort of a Champions League team in the Premier League, right? So I think that's definitely a good result for Leeds. I know Newcastle have their own struggles, replacing Isak and all that. But their midfield is still a strong midfield, right? I think Guimaraes and Tonali in there are definitely good midfielders on the top end in terms of midfielders in the Prem. So good result for Leeds. I'd say not so good result for Newcastle, but maybe that's a little bit unfair for them just because of everything that's going on with that club surrounding it. So I think that they probably can't wait to kind of get the market closed and see what they're going to end up with in terms of their forwards. But yeah, I think it's just one of those games where you take the point, you move on, and you look forward to the future.
Yeah, I only seen the highlights for this one too. I think it was kind of more of underwhelming game. I mean, a 0-0, but I think a better performance from Leeds than Newcastle, as we said. Question mark over how Newcastle will look as this season progressed because of the players coming in, players that have left, etc. But still a good structure, and Eddie Howe is still, good manager, as we know. So I think for me, obviously, I'm not wishing them the best, but hopefully as the season goes on, they figure it out. I think a more disappointing performance than anything for Newcastle. And like we said, any points for these promoted teams against an established team in the Premier League is always a good point.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving into Sunday for the match week, I think this was a result that kind of came as a shock, I'd say, maybe to people, maybe not. Given the results with Spurs for City, but away at Brighton, 2-1 for Brighton. I think brilliant 3 points for Brighton, and we've we sort of mentioned this. Brighton's one of those teams that, has their ups and downs, and on their day they can give a team to anybody in the Prem. It just seemed like, this was their day, sort of. They went down 1-0, came back, and got the 3 points at home to City. So brilliant result for them. They outplayed City on the expected goals. They had the same amount of shots, and Brighton had 7 shots on target to City's 2. So I mean, 2 shots on target for City during a game is a disappointing game. I know that they definitely outperformed Brighton in the possession, but I watched this game and I thought City started strong, and I think that's why they sort of went 1-0 up, right? They started with controlling sort of possession. I think Brighton couldn't get the ball in the first 20 minutes or so, and eventually Holland got a goal, and from that point the game sort of shifted. Brighton sort of started having more meaningful possession, I'd say, than City. City was sort of just keeping the ball but not sort of really doing anything with it, right? Not creating any chances or anything like that. So watching the game, I definitely think that it was a deserved 3 points for Brighton, in my opinion. But City, I mean, losing to Spurs, losing to Brighton this match week, I think that's kind of a worrying start for them. I think people expected them to kind of be back, right? City's back. And on that first match week, the victory away to Wolves, I think that everyone sort of had that opinion. The next 2 games were really sort of poor on their end. So I don't know necessarily what to make of them. Everyone's sort of writing them off and saying, yeah, this is not a City that's going to challenge for the title. But you and I know City very well. They can turn on any moment for them, and they could be a team that's not playable, right? So I think that there's always that fear with City, that they might just go on a run of 30 games. And I think that they have it in them. I definitely think. Will it happen? I'm not sure, but I guess let's wait and see, right? But disappointing result for them. I don't think that is sort of title challenging form. But again, with City, you never know, right? They can flip the switch at any moment and be back. And that's also a bit of context in that too. Is people look at that City team and criticize it, but some of their players that they're playing are just like, what's his name? Oscar Bob is starting on the right wing, 22-year-old, little to no experience, right? Savinho comes back, Ryan Cherky comes back, and that team changes a bit, right? I know they have some injuries in midfield too, and at the back too. I mean, so I definitely think we're going to see a different City deeper in the season when they get some of those players back. But here and now, I think disappointing result for City for sure.
100%, and disappointing performance as well because I watched the game. And I think, like you said, right? I think there's a couple things that's going on, that I would say, because I have this theory for City, right? When they get their players back, yes, I think they'll be better. But I think Pep came to England, changed the game, and I think the game is also changing a bit. Mm. Now again, you know what I mean? I don't know when that last shift was, but I think, like we just discussed with the Dakus and the Savinos, right? I mean, he always had like a Mars and a playful player, but I think now more than ever, the game has a lot more of those Madueke kind of players, stand still, that's quick from the standstill and stuff like that. And I think it's a thing where Pep is adapting to. I don't know if he will, if he will not. That's something remain. Like you said, City, they just won 4 in a row, so we're not gonna sit here and disrespect them. That's not what we're doing. But I think from the start of the season, what I can see is that back four, right? You said Oscar Bob, but I'm looking at, is his name Krishanov, right? In the back line. I remember we played them last season and he just looked, like you said, young, inexperienced and stuff like that. Like he's still not confident in his decisions. And Nori, as we know from Wolves last year, was always known to us FPL managers as a good attacking defender. You have John Stones was pretty much the only, like seasoned defender that's been there that started in that back line. So I think, like you said, when obviously Diaz and I don't know what's going on with Akanji and Ake and stuff like that because didn't see them. But yeah, I think there's a little bit of question there because I watched the game. And even after the game, I think one of the most telling thing, I guess, to the theory is, immediately after the game, there was no handshake. Pep walked. He didn't even go to shake the hands of the manager. And I think, even in something like that, like he's a young manager up and coming, and for sure, like that's a guy that's probably has watched and studied Pep and try to learn from him. So any sign of respect, I think, would have been, immense. And I'm sure they probably did make it up. But I think in the immediate, right, in the immediate after fact, there, right, he showed you Pep was a little bit upset, stuff like that. So as the season goes on, it's Man City. They can go on a 30 match run, and I eat my words, and I'm okay with that. But for now, I think they're trying to figure out the game from last season because it has changed. And like, there's so much other, as you've seen, Arsenal has done it. Pep's doing it for a long time, but we just mentioned that back four, right? And a lot of people make fun of it about buying defenders, but for a manager like Pep, that the first start of the attack is with the goalkeeper, and it's so structural that if you make a pass to the left foot instead of the right foot, slows the play down. You know what I mean? So it's like I think with those defenders that he have right now that played this game was just not, they couldn't progress anything from back there. And there's also a question mark with the way they played on the field. But for a manager like him, it's so important, and he's trying to figure it out in terms of finding that. Like when Diaz is there, it's fine. When Stones is there, it's fine. But we have to also think that these are guys that are getting older. He's been playing in the Premier League for a little while, so one thing I've always seen is, the Premier League will figure you out no matter how good you think you are. They won four in a row. Listen, respect. But I think the Premier League, after a while, I don't know how long it takes, obviously, differentiate depending on whatever. But I think over a while, the Premier League will figure you out. And I think more than ever now, with the low blocks and stuff like that, it's tough for any team, especially for a team that plays the way that Pep wants to play. You're moving, you're supposed to use the ball to move players out of position, and players are just not moving. Like they're letting you have the ball in certain areas and telling you to pretty much come and break them down. And that highly depends on a lot of very technical players. And nowadays, as you've seen it, most of the players that have the ball are the two center backs, so you have to be, I think, very, very good. And I think they're just figuring that out. That's just what I think. They're figuring that out right now. And I don't know if those players are good enough. There's still question marks over them. As the season goes, we will see.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Moving on, I guess, the next game of that match week was the Forest West Ham game, and West Ham with their first points and first victory on the board. A 3-0 victory is something that kind of just, insinuates dominance, right? You're not winning 3-0 if you don't deserve to win the game. I didn't necessarily watch this game, so I don't really have too much on it, but I think good victory for West Ham to win away to Forest. I don't know that those teams are sort of maybe of the same caliber based off of last season, right? But I think it's a very, very good victory for them. Away, score 3 goals, win the match, keep a clean sheet. I think they'll take that and move on.
I think when you watch the highlights, it looks good, right? I think after, like we said, goals change games. And I think what I was most impressed with was West Ham for sure in that game, because not of the 3 goals, but how they just kept in the game, because I felt like when we played them from the previous week, like we said, they were going tit for tat. And I think you have to pick those moments, not saying that, West Ham can't do that, but especially in the Premier League against high quality, you have to pick those moments. So I think it was a very mature and a performance that I'm not a West Ham fan, but watching them from the outside, I think West Ham fans could appreciate and been looking for. And you could say, they took their chances when the chances came, because I think up until 70 plus minutes, it was 0-0. So I was watching it really impressing the way that they're keeping themselves in the game and not leaving themselves open. As you know, nowadays, the more you give yourself the chance, express yourself at the other end, the better it is for you to win the games. I think overall, like you said, a good win finally for West Ham and a very mature performance. And I know West Ham fans are happy, concerning as well from the other side, because obviously that's a Nuno, and Nuno's team barely ever concedes. So for them to concede 3, I think, there's question mark there about the game, but I don't think about Nuno in general.
Yeah, absolutely. 2 games left for this match week, and we're gonna skip the big game of the match week and leave that for the last one, just because I feel like it's better if we end on that. So going into the late game on Sunday, Villa Crystal Palace. This game I think was played at 3 p.m. our times. I definitely did not get a chance to see it. I was sort of trying to get stuff done over the weekend, especially after, devoting my morning to the Prem. So, but again, another 3-0 victory, this time Crystal Palace away to Villa. I think it's honestly surprising the way that Crystal Palace have sort of started this season for me, just because they haven't lost a game. This is their first victory. They have um, 2 draws. So I think that based off of, them losing Eze and sort of some changes happening and some, I guess, potentially losing Mark Gay too. So I think it's a good result for Crystal Palace. I mean, a victory away to Villa, who, is a Europa League team, right? They're playing European football this year. Is a good victory, right? They were in the Champions League last year, so it's a good squad, but I think it's a struggling squad at the moment. I don't know what their incomings, are looking like up until now. I mean, they haven't really signed anything. So again, I don't know sort of what their, I guess, strategy is, right? Year to year, you and I know that if you don't strengthen the Premier League, you're gonna fall behind, and I just don't think that they've strengthened yet, and I think it's kind of showing, right? New season, they're yet to score a goal. They have the 1 point, I think, from the Newcastle game, so I don't know where they're headed, but again, I guess we'll see, right?
I think the mood around Crystal Palace and everything, not just with the what they've done to start the season, but you got to remember they just won the FA Cup and they also won the Community Shield. So I think that has also lifted them. I know they lost Eze to Arsenal, but I think like we said with Iraola, right? Glasner has proven that he's absolutely a top manager. I think he's going to be, along with Iraola, one of the next ones to make that big step to a Big Six team. He's shown that he can set his team up. I think one thing we can always say about Crystal Palace, we played them early on. They are a very well structured team. Of think their own way in terms of not a Brighton, but their own way. If they keep Glasner now, they will play their way and they'll be a mid-table team, and they'll be, when you go to Crystal Palace, it will be a tough game. So I think a good win for them. Obviously, like we said, question mark over Villa. We've been saying that for a long time. Villa look absolutely poor. But I think Crystal Palace, we have to also remember them playing European football as well this season. I mean, they're playing Conference League, but it's still European football for them. I think it's their first time ever in the club history. So it's still a big boost. I know I can only imagine what the feeling around that club is. Having the manager and a good team that they have, they still have top players. When you think about Sar, I mean, I know a lot of people want him in their team, FPL team, and Mateta, right? He got a yellow card that match week for kicking the flag. Shows that the game is gone. But yeah, I think overall we can't forget that, and I think Crystal Palace will be a good team this season. I don't know where they'll finish, but I think they'll finish up there in the top 10 for sure. I think they're a good team. Over Glasner has shown that he can set his team up, and I mean, yeah, FA Cup and Community Shield winners, so have to put some respect.
Absolutely. Put some respect on this Palace side for sure. All right, last game of the match week, the biggest game probably of the season so far was first and second place, right, from last year. So, um, Liverpool obviously winning 1-0 against Arsenal. There was a lot said about this game after the game, and I think, trying to give my most unbiased opinion, obviously as an Arsenal fan, I think that it was really an evenly matched game. I honestly believe that this game should have finished as a draw, and then I think it would have been a better representation of the game itself. I think Arsenal kind of, played a little bit better in the first half, and then Liverpool in the second half. But away to Anfield is not an easy place. You and I both know that. I don't even know when the last time Arsenal's won there. I think it's been I think it actually was the last time Arteta was a player in the squad, so a very long time. But overall, I think it was a pretty even game. Right? Obviously, hit a insane free kick, which got Liverpool at 3 points. I think it was one of those games where one moment of sort of brilliance or magic won the game, and that's just exactly what happened. Early on in the game, Saliba went out with an injury, and I was, kind of just said to myself, like, yeah, of course, here we go, right? Something to go wrong for us. And to be honest, I don't think that him going out affected us at all. I mean, I think that we defended very well. There was not a lot of, I'd say, clear cut chances for either side in this game. Mascara came in and sort of did his job pretty well. I don't think that, I know a lot of people criticize Arteta's selection, especially in the midfield, right? And I don't know that his selection was necessarily more tactical than it was, based off of injuries. Odegaard coming back from an injury. So I don't know if if he was fit to play the full 90 or whatever. I think one criticism that I would have had for Arteta in this game was I would have liked to see Eze um, maybe start from the second half. Obviously, I would have liked to see him start on that left wing from the get go, but I think it was just too early for him to come in. But definitely, I think I would have liked to see him come on the game or come into the game a little bit earlier, right? I think, he obviously has that flair, and it's sort of something that we've been missing on that left hand side. And that's not to say that, I really don't like sort of necessarily bashing Martinelli. I think that sometimes his criticism is warranted, but I think it goes a little bit too far at times. Again, I think that he's a player who we all know his strengths and qualities, right? He's still young. I mean, he's only 24 years old. I think that he has room to grow and whatnot. But I think that we could have benefited from Eze coming on a little bit earlier. But overall, I thought it was a pretty sort of even game. I think Liverpool were a bit fortunate to come away with the 3 points, but what's done is done, and you kind of have to move on and sort of make sure that you bounce back from this and you don't stray too far away. And when they come back to the Emirates, I think that turns into a must-win game depending on how the season goes and the rest of the results, for Liverpool and for Arsenal. So, yeah, I think pretty even game. Um, Liverpool fortunate. That's really kind of all I have for that game.
Yeah, I mean, you have a better in depth of it than I do. I watched the game. Obviously, I don't know either teams. I mean, I know both teams. I'm watching them in the Premier League, and I know them pretty well from that. But in terms of being a fan, you said all the right points in terms of what you wanted to see from Arsenal. I'm sure for Liverpool fans as well, they have their takes, and I'd love to hear. I watched the game. I felt from my point of view, from an outsider, that it was a very even game, but it's nothing that I didn't expect, honestly. I think it was what's to be expected from, we talked about it earlier in all the top six teams, right? Like nothing really separates these teams much nowadays, they all can defend, they all can attack, they all have good midfield, they all have good goalkeepers, etc. So the game was won by one of those special moments, a good free kick. It could have been Arsenal could have had it as well. You have those special players. So it's just one of those games, I guess, where I see it as, it was an even match game. I don't think it was anything where you can walk away and saying that one team deserved or nothing. It was just a special moment. You could have had that on either side. And yeah, I think that's how I saw the game. But as you said, from Arsenal, you have to see it as a different perspective. Now you have, at least you've gotten that game out of the way. More games to go. And then you guys also see them again. And I'm sure as the season goes on, we've discussed, I think Liverpool obviously are title favorites, but I don't think that they're unbeatable. So as the season goes, I'm sure they'll lose games, points will be dropped, and we will see where it goes from there. But yeah, even game won by, in my opinion, by just a special free kick, a good free kick from Double Sly. And yeah, I don't see anything different.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, that kind of concludes the match week. International break up next. So I guess next time you and I will see each other, Akeem, will be in 2 weeks' time, going over the fourth match week. Again, thank God the Prem is back. We have stuff to discuss. Things to look forward to every weekend. Although this kind of international break is coming a little bit early, in my opinion, but exciting nonetheless.
I don't know how I missed this earlier, man. It just came to my mind. But you mentioned when the build up to that Arsenal Liverpool game, that it was the biggest game of the season, mate. You clearly did not watch that Grimsby Man United game, did you? You clearly missed that Grimsby Man United game, bro.
A new rival for United.
I think absolutely the biggest game of the season so far. What a win for Grimsby.
Well, I think that puts United's trophy aspirations this season to bed. Unless they have another run in the FA Cup, I think they're done. They have one thing to focus on, and that's the Premier League. So it should be better for them, I guess. That's a good one, man. I like that. Anything for you before we close out, Akeem?
No, I'm just happy the Prem's back.
All right. Well, that concludes this. We'll try and do this every match week. moving forward. I know the first 3 match weeks, you and I were trying to get together, and it's just tough, with a lot of different things going on, but we'll try and do one of these every week. Until then, thank you.